5 states just went under winter storm warnings: Alaska, Maine, Colorado, California, Wyoming. From one coast to the other, this storm is spreading fast, and right now, as you're watching this, it's still growing. This isn't something that happened yesterday or might happen tomorrow. This is unfolding at this very moment, expanding across the entire width of our country in a way that has forecasters watching their screens more carefully than usual. Stay with me for the next several minutes, because we're going to break down exactly what's happening across these 5 states, why this storm is different from the typical winter weather we see, and what it means for millions of people living in its path. This isn't just about snow, it's about a weather pattern affecting distant regions of America simultaneously. Think about the geography for just a second. Alaska sits in the far northwest, separated from the rest of the country by Canada. Maine anchors the northeast corner, where the Atlantic Ocean meets rocky coastline. Colorado and Wyoming hold down the Rocky Mountain region in the center of the nation, and California stretches along the entire west coast, known more for sunshine than blizzards. These 5 states don't usually have much in common when it comes to weather. They're separated by thousands of miles, different climates, completely different landscapes. Yet right now, regions in all 5 states are under the same type of warning. Winter storm warnings don't get issued lightly. They mean conditions are either happening or about to happen that will make travel dangerous or impossible. They mean accumulating snow, powerful winds, and situations where people need to take this seriously. What makes this particularly striking is the timing. We're in the second week of February, deep enough into winter that these states have already dealt with their share of cold and snow. This isn't the first winter storm of the season, but it's the one that's spreading across the widest geographic area all at once. From the Alaskan wilderness to the mountains of California, from the high plains of Wyoming to the Front Range of Colorado, all the way to the forests of Maine, communities are preparing for the same thing: heavy snow, strong winds, conditions that shut things down. And here's what you need to understand right from the start. According to current forecasts, this storm system is expected to continue developing over the next day or two. Forecasters are tracking its movement and monitoring how it interacts with moisture sources and cold air patterns. When forecasters say a storm is still developing, it means conditions may continue to change in affected areas. People should monitor official forecasts for their specific location. It means people in these 5 states are watching the sky and checking forecasts multiple times a day because they know what's coming isn't here yet. The National Weather Service has issued warnings for specific regions across all 5 states. Different offices, different regions, different forecasters, all looking at the same large-scale pattern and coming to the same conclusion. This needs attention. This is serious enough that people need to change their plans, stock up on supplies, prepare to stay home. In Alaska, where winter weather is expected and prepared for, they're still issuing warnings because this system is bringing conditions that challenge even their infrastructure. In California, where many communities aren't built for heavy mountain snow, the warnings carry even more weight. These aren't routine advisories. These are the alerts that make local news anchors adjust their schedules and emergency managers activate their plans. If you want to stay updated on where this storm goes next, how it develops, and what areas might see warnings expand, hit that subscribe button right now. We're tracking this system closely, and we'll keep you informed as conditions change. And while you're here, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, especially if you're in one of these 5 states or have family who is. This is the kind of weather event that connects people across vast distances, and I want to hear your perspective. Let's talk about scale for a moment, because that's really what sets this apart. We see winter storms all the time during these months. The northern states expect them. Mountain communities build their entire infrastructure around handling them. But when you see warnings stretching from Alaska to Maine, you're looking at a storm system that's tapping into multiple sources of energy and moisture. You're looking at atmospheric conditions that are aligned in a specific way, creating impacts across drastically different environments at the same time. A fishing village on the coast of Alaska and a ski town in the California Sierra Nevada don't usually experience the same weather event simultaneously. Yet that's exactly what's happening right now. The distances we're talking about are massive. From the western edge of Alaska to the eastern shore of Maine, you're spanning more than 4,000 miles. That's about 1.5 times the width of the continental United States. Wyoming sits almost dead center of the country. Colorado shares its southern border. California stretches along the Pacific. These states represent different weather patterns, different storm tracks, different typical winter experiences, but this weather pattern is widespread enough to affect all these regions. And remember, This is happening right now, not last week, not in some forecast model for next month. Today, this moment. As you're reading these words or listening to this video, snow is falling, winds are blowing, and people are dealing with the reality of this storm. Roads are closing, flights are being cancelled, schools are shutting down, power crews are positioning themselves for outages. This is active, unfolding, and still intensifying. So let's dig deeper into why these specific 5 states ended up in the path of the same massive storm system, because understanding that helps us understand just how significant this weather event really is. When you first hear that Alaska, Maine, Colorado, California, and Wyoming are all under winter storm warnings at the same time, it sounds almost random. Like someone threw darts at a map and these 5 states just happened to get hit. But there's nothing random about it. There's a clear meteorological pattern at work here, a specific set of atmospheric conditions that connects these distant places into one coherent weather story. And understanding that pattern helps us see why this storm is as significant as it is. Let's start with the source. Every major winter storm has an origin point, a place where the ingredients first come together. For this system, that origin is in Alaska. The northern Pacific Ocean and the Gulf of Alaska are massive generators of storm energy during winter months. Cold Arctic air sits over Alaska and northern Canada, creating a temperature contrast with the relatively warmer ocean water. That contrast is like fuel. It creates instability. It gives storms their power. When a weather system forms in that region, it's tapping into some of the most potent winter storm energy available on the planet. But Alaska isn't just the starting point. It's also the first casualty. As this system organized and strengthened over the Gulf of Alaska, it began pulling in moisture from the Pacific and wrapping it around a core of extremely cold air. That combination, moisture plus cold, equals heavy snow. For Alaskan communities, especially those along the southern coast and in the interior, this meant the storm was going to dump significant snow before it ever moved toward the lower states. Alaska gets hit first because it's where the storm is born. Now here's where it gets interesting. As this system matured, it didn't just sit over Alaska and spin itself out like many storms do. Instead, it began to tap into the jet stream, that river of fast-moving air high up in the atmosphere that steers weather systems across continents. The jet stream right now is positioned in a way that's creating a pathway from Alaska, down through the western mountains and eventually curving back toward the northeast. Think of it like a highway for storms. This system found the on-ramp in Alaska and started traveling. Wyoming and Colorado come into play because of the Rocky Mountains. When a storm system loaded with moisture hits a mountain range, something called orographic lift happens. Basically, the air is forced to rise up and over the mountains. As it rises, it cools. As it cools, the moisture condenses and falls as snow. The higher you go, the more intense this effect becomes. The Rockies are some of the tallest mountains in North America. They act like a giant snowmaking machine when the right storm comes through. This system, tracking south and east from Alaska, is running directly into the Rockies. Wyoming sits right in the path. So does Colorado. Both states have high elevation terrain that amplifies whatever the storm is already producing. A system that might drop moderate snow over flat land can dump feet of snow when it hits these mountains. California's involvement comes from a similar mechanism but with a twist. The Sierra Nevada mountain range runs along the eastern edge of California, creating a natural barrier between the coast and the interior deserts. When Pacific moisture gets pushed up against these mountains, the result is often dramatic snowfall at higher elevations. Right now, this storm system is tapping into moisture from the Pacific, while simultaneously pulling down cold air from the north. That combination is slamming into the Sierra Nevada. Towns like Mammoth Lakes and areas around Lake Tahoe are in the direct crosshairs. The elevation there ranges from 6,000 to over 10,000 feet. At those heights, with this much moisture and this much cold air, you get dangerous snow accumulation. California might be known for beaches and palm trees, but its mountains know how to produce blizzards when conditions align. Then there's Maine, and this is where people often get confused. How does a storm that starts in Alaska and hits the Rockies also affect the northeastern corner of the country? The answer lies in how these systems evolve. As the main storm energy moves through the Rockies, it doesn't just disappear. It continues tracking eastward, and as it does, it taps into new sources of moisture. By the time the system approaches the east coast, it's interacting with Atlantic Ocean moisture. Cold air is still diving down from Canada. That cold air meets the moisture coming off the Atlantic. Maine, sitting right where these two forces collide, ends up in a warning zone. The storm that started in Alaska has traveled thousands of miles, changed characteristics, picked up new energy, but it's still part of the same large-scale weather pattern. What ties all 5 states together is the jet stream configuration. Right now, the jet stream is stretched across the country in a way that allows this one storm system to influence a massive geographic area. Meteorologists describe this as a connected large-scale weather pattern affecting multiple regions rather than separate independent systems. The cold air source is the same, the overall pressure pattern is the same. The timing is coordinated. Alaska gets hit first because that's where it starts. Wyoming and Colorado get hit next because the storm tracks right over their mountains. California gets hit simultaneously because it's on the same latitude and the mountains there interact with the same moisture sources. Maine gets hit last as the system continues its journey and picks up Atlantic energy. This is the kind of pattern that doesn't happen every winter. Most storms are regional. A system hits the Pacific Northwest. A separate system develops in the Midwest. Another forms along the Gulf Coast. They're independent events. But every so often, the atmospheric setup creates a storm that has continental reach. This is one of those times. The jet stream is positioned just right. The cold air is in the right place. The moisture sources are available. And the result is 5 states, separated by thousands of miles, all dealing with the same threat. Understanding this pattern also helps us understand why the storm is still growing. As it moves and evolves, it's not losing energy. It's finding new sources. Every time it crosses a mountain range, it produces more snow. Every time it taps into ocean moisture, it intensifies. The system is feeding itself as it travels, which means forecasters indicate that different regions will experience peak conditions at different times as the weather pattern continues to move. People in affected areas should monitor local weather service updates for their specific location. So when you hear that 5 states are under warnings, don't think of it as 5 unrelated problems. Think of it as one massive atmospheric event with 5 major impact zones. Think of it as a large-scale weather pattern creating impacts across multiple regions of the continent. And now that we understand the pattern, let's zoom in on what's actually happening in each of these states, starting with the places where this all began. Let's start where the storm started, Alaska. For communities across the state, winter storms are a fact of life. They prepare for them. They expect them. Infrastructure is built with snow and cold in mind. Roads are designed to be ploughed repeatedly. Buildings are insulated against extreme temperatures. People keep emergency supplies stocked from November through March because they know conditions can turn severe without much warning. But even with preparation and experience, this storm requires heightened attention and readiness. The warnings in Alaska focus on areas from the southern coast through the interior. We're talking about places that already know how to handle winter: Anchorage, Fairbanks, the Kenai Peninsula. These are communities experienced with winter weather. This system is bringing conditions that require their full winter preparedness protocols. Heavy snow falling at rates that make it hard for ploughs to keep up. Winds strong enough to create whiteout conditions even in areas with some visibility protection. And temperatures cold enough that the snow isn't the wet, heavy kind that's easier to move. This is light, powdery snow that blows around easily and piles up quickly. For rural Alaska, the challenges multiply. There are communities accessible only by plane or snowmobile during winter months. When storms like this occur, some remote communities experience temporary delays in scheduled services until weather conditions improve. Medical emergencies become life-threatening because evacuation isn't possible. People in these areas know how to be self-sufficient, but there's always a limit to how long you can ride out severe conditions without resupply. This storm presents challenges that require careful resource management. Wind is a major factor in Alaska right now. It's not just about how much snow falls, it's about what happens to that snow once it's on the ground. Winds in some areas are strong enough to pick up snow that fell hours ago and move it around, creating drifts that can cover roads and affect structures. Whiteout conditions don't always mean snow is actively falling. Sometimes it means the wind is blowing existing snow so hard that you can't see anything. Visibility becomes severely limited during whiteout conditions, making navigation extremely difficult and travel inadvisable. That's the condition parts of Alaska are dealing with right now. Now let's shift south and east to Wyoming. This state sits in the heart of the Rocky Mountain region, and its landscape is defined by high plains, mountain ranges, and elevation that rarely drops below 5,000 feet. When winter storms hit Wyoming, they hit hard. The wind alone can be dangerous. Wyoming is known for wind. There are stretches of highway where wind is such a constant problem that they've installed windsocks and warning systems to tell drivers when conditions are too dangerous to proceed. Add heavy snow to that wind, and you have a recipe for impossible travel. The winter storm warnings in Wyoming cover much of the state, but the focus is on areas along the mountain ranges and the higher elevation plains, places like Casper, Cheyenne, the area around the Medicine Bow Range. These are regions where the population is spread out, where towns might be an hour or more apart, and where being caught on the road during a storm can become dangerous and require emergency assistance. Wyoming residents understand this. They carry emergency kits in their vehicles during winter: blankets, food, water, flashlights. Travel assistance may be delayed during severe weather conditions. Ranch country is particularly vulnerable during storms like this. Wyoming's economy is built partly on agriculture, and that means livestock. Cattle and sheep don't stop needing care just because a blizzard is blowing. Ranchers have to get out in the storm to make sure animals have access to food and water, to ensure animals are safe and move herds to sheltered areas if possible. It's dangerous work. This work requires careful safety precautions and planning. But for families whose livelihood depends on those animals, there's no choice. The storm doesn't pause for anyone. What both Alaska and Wyoming share right now is isolation. These aren't densely populated states. When a storm hits, you can't just walk to a neighbor's house or drive 5 minutes to a store. Distances are real. Help is far away. That's why the warnings matter so much. When the National Weather Service tells people in these states that travel will be dangerous or impossible, they're not exaggerating. They're stating a fact based on conditions that can become very dangerous when people don't take proper precautions. The timeline matters too. These warnings didn't just pop up for a few hours, they're lasting days in some areas. That's a long time to be housebound, to deal with power outages, to manage limited supplies. Both states have communities that lose electricity during heavy snow and wind events. Snow, ice, and wind can affect power infrastructure. Repair crews can't reach problem areas until conditions improve. People use backup heating sources like generators or wood stoves, while utility crews work to restore power service. Alaska and Wyoming are tough places full of tough people. They don't scare easily. They've lived through storms before, and they'll live through storms again. But this system is significant even by their standards. The combination of heavy snow, strong wind, extreme cold, and extended duration creates a situation where even experienced winter residents have to take extra precautions. Schools close, businesses shut down, travel advisories turn into travel bans, and people settle in to wait it out, knowing that fighting the storm is pointless. You prepare for weather like this and wait for conditions to improve. But here's the thing. Alaska and Wyoming are used to harsh winters. Their infrastructure is designed for it. Their residents expect it. The next two states we're going to talk about, they have a very different relationship with winter storms, and that's where this situation gets even more concerning. When severe winter weather hits places that aren't as prepared, that don't see it as often, the impacts can be even more dramatic, and that's exactly what's happening right now in Colorado and California. Colorado and California both have mountains, both have winter sports industries built around snow, both have residents who understand that winter in the high country means preparing for storms. But there's a crucial difference between these states and Alaska or Wyoming. In Colorado and California, major population centers sit close to mountain regions. When storms affect these mountains, millions of people nearby experience immediate impacts to daily life. That's the situation unfolding right now. Let's look at Colorado first. The state's Front Range, where cities like Denver, Boulder, and Fort Collins sit, runs right along the eastern edge of the Rocky Mountains. It's beautiful geography. People can see the mountains from their homes. They can drive an hour and be on a ski slope. But that proximity means when a major storm comes through the mountains, those cities feel the effects. This system is hitting the Colorado Rockies hard. The high country, areas above 8,000 or 9,000 feet, is seeing heavy snow. Mountain passes are closing. Interstate highways that cross the mountains are becoming impassable. Interstate 70 is the main east-west corridor through Colorado. It connects Denver to the mountain communities and eventually to Utah. During a winter storm like this, sections of that highway shut down. Not because officials want to inconvenience people, but because traveling through a mountain pass during a blizzard is extremely dangerous. The road winds through terrain where one side is a mountain wall and the other side is a drop-off. Visibility can go to 0 in minutes. Vehicles may lose traction on icy roads. Large vehicles face challenging conditions on steep, winding mountain roads during winter storms. What should be a 2-hour drive turns into an 8-hour nightmare or an impossible journey. Right now, portions of Interstate 70 are closed. Travelers should wait for conditions to improve before attempting to continue their journey. Truckers hauling goods across the country are delayed. Ski resort workers trying to get to their jobs can't make it. The resort towns themselves are dealing with a different set of challenges. Places like Vail, Breckenridge, Aspen, and Steamboat Springs depend on winter tourism. Snow is good for business. But there's a difference between good snow and dangerous snow. When a storm dumps so much snow so fast that roads become impassable, some visitors are extending their stays until road conditions allow safe travel. Hotels fill up with people who can't leave. Road closures temporarily delay deliveries until conditions improve. Some workers face temporary commute challenges when roads are closed or restricted. The infrastructure that makes these towns function gets stressed in ways that highlight how isolated they really are. They're connected to the rest of Colorado by a handful of roads that wind through mountain passes. When these roads close, these communities become temporarily isolated until conditions improve. Denver and the Front Range cities aren't under the same intense warnings as the high country, but they're close enough to feel the impacts. Snow that falls in the mountains eventually moves east. The wind pushes it. The storm tracks that way. Denver sits at about a mile high in elevation, and it's no stranger to snow. But the city has a complex relationship with winter storms. Sometimes the mountains block the worst of it. Sometimes the city gets buried. It depends on the exact track of the storm, the temperature profile, and how the wind is flowing. Right now, residents along the Front Range are watching carefully. They know that when the mountains are getting hammered this hard, there's always a chance conditions will extend east. People are checking forecasts multiple times a day. They're topping off gas tanks. They're making sure they have food at home, just in case. Now let's shift to California, because this is where a lot of people get surprised. California, a winter storm. Most of the country thinks of California as sunshine and warm weather, and for much of the state that's accurate. Los Angeles isn't dealing with snow, San Francisco isn't under a winter storm warning, but California is a geographically diverse state. It has deserts, it has coastline, and it has serious mountains. The Sierra Nevada range runs for hundreds of miles along the eastern part of the state, and peaks in that range top out above 14,000 feet. When winter storms hit the Sierra Nevada, they produce conditions as severe as anywhere in the country. Right now, the winter storm warnings in California focus on the Sierra Nevada, areas around Lake Tahoe, which straddles the California-Nevada border, Mammoth Mountain, one of the premier ski destinations in the country, the passes that cross the mountains connecting California's Central Valley to Nevada. These areas are seeing heavy snow accumulation. We're not talking about a few inches, we're talking about snow measured in feet. Heavy snow accumulation may require clearing from roofs, especially in areas less accustomed to significant snowfall. Snowdrifts may accumulate against doorways and require clearing. Highway 80 is the main route across the northern Sierra Nevada. It connects Sacramento to Reno. During major winter storms, this highway closes. Chain requirements get put in place first, meaning you can't drive the route without tire chains. Then, if conditions worsen, they close it entirely. Thousands of people use that highway every day. Truckers, commuters, tourists heading to Tahoe. When it closes, all those people have to find alternate routes that add hours to their trips, or they have to wait. Right now, travelers are facing exactly that situation. The highway is either closed or operating under severe restrictions. People who thought they'd make a quick trip to the mountains are stuck. The communities in the Sierra Nevada face challenges similar to Colorado's mountain towns. They're isolated. They're dependent on a few roads that can become impassable quickly. When a storm like this hits, the focus shifts from normal life to survival mode. Keeping the power on, keeping people safe, making sure emergency services can function. Ski resorts close not because there's too much snow for skiing, but because it's too dangerous for anyone to be on the mountain. Avalanche risk increases significantly during and after heavy snowfall. Slopes that were stable can become dangerous quickly. Ski patrol teams work around the clock to assess conditions and trigger controlled avalanches before they happen naturally and catch people. What makes California's situation particularly notable is the contrast. While mountain communities are buried in snow, dealing with blizzard conditions and whiteouts, other parts of the state are experiencing completely normal weather. People in San Diego are going to the beach. Los Angeles is sunny and mild. That divide is surreal. It's a reminder that California isn't one climate. It's several climates packed into one state. But for the people in the mountains right now, that contrast doesn't matter. They're living through a serious winter storm that demands respect and preparation. Both Colorado and California have populations that include people who moved from other parts of the country, people who might not have much experience with severe winter weather. Someone who grew up in Texas and moved to Denver for work might not fully understand what a mountain blizzard can do. Someone who moved to a Tahoe cabin from coastal California might underestimate the danger. That's why education and clear warnings matter so much. Local officials, weather services, and news outlets have to communicate the seriousness of the situation in ways that break through to people who don't have a lifetime of winter experience, and both states are dealing with this storm at the same time. The same weather pattern that's burying the Colorado Rockies is also slamming the California Sierra Nevada. The storm is wide enough and powerful enough to hit both mountain ranges simultaneously, which brings us back to the scale of this event. This isn't a regional problem, this is continental, but we're not done yet. There's one more state to talk about, and it's 3,000 miles away from where we started. Maine sits in the far northeastern corner of the country. It's about as far from Alaska as you can get while staying in the United States. Which raises an obvious question. How is Maine part of the same storm system that's affecting the other 4 states? How does a weather event that started in the Gulf of Alaska and moved through the Rockies and the Sierra Nevada end up impacting coastal New England? The answer reveals just how large and complex this storm system really is. Let's talk about how continental-scale storm systems work. When a storm forms, it's driven by differences in temperature and pressure. Cold air from the Arctic wants to move south. Warm, moist air from lower latitudes wants to move north. Where those two air masses meet, you get instability. You get storm development. The jet stream, that high-altitude river of air we talked about earlier, guides these systems across continents. A storm that forms in one location doesn't just stay there. It moves, it evolves, and as it moves, it can tap into new sources of energy and moisture. This particular system started over Alaska, pulled together cold Arctic air and Pacific moisture, and began tracking southeast. As it moved through the Rockies, it interacted with the mountains, producing heavy snow through orographic lift. As it continued east, the core of the system began to weaken slightly, but the overall pattern remained intact. The jet stream continued steering it. Cold air continued feeding it. And as the system approached the east coast, it encountered a new ingredient: Atlantic Ocean moisture. The Atlantic Ocean off the New England coast is relatively warm compared to the air over land during winter. When cold air moves out over that warmer water, it picks up moisture. That moisture-laden air then gets pulled back toward land by the storm system. The result is a coastal storm, sometimes called a nor'easter when the winds come from the northeast. Maine, positioned right where the cold continental air meets the moisture from the Atlantic, ends up in the warning zone. The warnings in Maine focus on the southern and southwestern parts of the state. Portland, the area around Augusta, communities inland toward the New Hampshire border. These areas are forecast to see accumulating snow, wind, and reduced visibility. It's not the same storm that hit Alaska days ago. It's evolved, it's changed, but it's still part of the same large-scale atmospheric pattern. The cold air driving the snow in Maine originated from the same Arctic source that fed the Alaska storm. The jet stream pattern that guided the system across the Rockies is the same pattern steering it into New England. It's all connected. Maine is no stranger to winter storms. The state gets hit regularly during the cold months. Coastal storms, lake-effect snow from the Great Lakes, Alberta clippers diving down from Canada. Residents know how to handle snow. They keep shovels ready. They have generators for power outages. They stock up on supplies before a storm hits. But each storm is different, and this one carries a level of organization and intensity that makes it worth paying attention to. Timing plays a role too. We're in mid-February, which is still peak winter for New England. The ground is frozen. Lakes and ponds are covered in ice. Trees are bare. When snow falls during this time of year, it doesn't melt quickly. It accumulates. If this storm delivers the snow forecasters expect, it will add significantly to what's already on the ground. That creates problems. Snow accumulation on roofs increases throughout the winter season. Ice dams can form on roofs, requiring attention to prevent water issues. Roads become narrower because there's no place left to push the snow. Coastal areas face additional concerns. The combination of snow and wind can create storm surge issues even during winter. High tide combined with strong onshore winds pushes water up against the coast. Flooding can occur in low-lying areas. Coastal roads get covered with ice and seawater, making them impassable. Fishing communities may experience temporary interruptions to harbour access. Maine's economy is tied to the ocean in many ways, and a winter storm that brings strong coastal winds disrupts more than just travel. The connection between all 5 states becomes clear when you step back and look at the bigger picture. This isn't 5 random storm systems, it's one massive atmospheric event with multiple impact zones spread across a continent. The cold air source is singular, the jet stream pattern is singular, the overall weather setup is singular, but because the United States spans such a vast area, crossing multiple time zones and covering drastically different landscapes, that one weather pattern manifests in different ways depending on location. Alaska gets the initial blast of Arctic cold and Pacific moisture. Wyoming and Colorado get the mountain-enhanced snowfall. California gets the Sierra Nevada version of the same mechanism, and Maine gets the tail end, where the system taps into Atlantic moisture and creates a coastal winter storm. Understanding this helps us appreciate the scale. Weather systems this large don't develop often. Most winters see several regional storms. The Northwest gets hit by Pacific systems. The Midwest deals with Alberta clippers and Great Lakes snow. The East Coast faces nor'easters, but they're usually independent events. This storm, because of how the jet stream is configured and how the cold air is positioned, is able to influence all these regions as part of one connected pattern. That's what makes it noteworthy. That's why 5 states with vastly different geographies and climates are all under warnings at the same time. For the people in Maine right now, the origin of the storm doesn't change what they have to do. They have to prepare. They have to stock up on essentials. They have to make sure they can ride out a day or 2 of heavy snow and wind. They have to check on neighbours, especially older residents who might need help clearing driveways or getting to the store. They have to trust that power crews are ready to respond if lines go down. They have to accept that sometimes winter in New England means staying home and waiting for the storm to pass, but knowing that their storm is part of a larger continental event does add context. It explains why forecasters are talking about this system with particular attention. It explains why weather services across multiple states issued warnings within days of each other. And it sets the stage for understanding what makes this specific storm different from the many other winter storms we see every year, which is exactly what we need to explore next. Winter storms happen every year. That's not news. Northern states expect them. Mountain communities prepare for them. Weather services issue warnings, people stock up on supplies, and life goes on. So what makes this particular storm worth this much attention? What separates this system from the dozens of other winter weather events that occur every cold season? The answer lies in a combination of factors that, when they come together, create conditions that forecasters watch more closely than usual. First, there's the geographic scale. We've talked about this already, but it's worth emphasizing again. 5 states under warnings at the same time, spread across the entire width of the country, represents a storm system with unusual reach. Most winter storms affect one region. Pacific systems hit the Northwest and maybe stretch into the Rockies. Midwest storms impact the Great Lakes region and perhaps the Ohio Valley. Coastal storms hammer New England, but this system is touching the Pacific, the Rockies, and the Atlantic all at once. That kind of reach requires a specific atmospheric setup that doesn't happen frequently. Second, the storm is still developing. This isn't a system that peaked and is now weakening. Current forecasts suggest the storm continues to organise and draw moisture from multiple sources. That means the worst conditions haven't necessarily hit yet. When forecasters say a storm is still growing, they mean the impacts already being felt could get worse. They mean additional areas might be added to warning zones. They mean the duration of severe conditions could extend longer than initial forecasts suggested. A developing storm is a dynamic situation. It requires constant monitoring and adjustment of predictions. Third, the timing matters. We're in mid-February. That might not sound significant, but it is. By mid-February, winter fatigue has set in for many people living in cold climates. They've already dealt with snow. They've already shoveled driveways multiple times. They're tired of the cold. They're looking forward to spring. When another major storm hits at this point in the season, it's harder to maintain the energy and focus needed to prepare properly. Additionally, February storms can be particularly problematic because of how much snow is already on the ground from earlier in the winter. Roofs are already carrying weight, snowbanks are already high. Adding more snow to that existing base creates structural and logistical problems that wouldn't exist with an earlier season storm. Fourth, there's the wind component. Heavy snow is one thing. Heavy snow combined with strong winds is something else entirely. Wind transforms a snow event into a blizzard. It creates whiteout conditions that make travel impossible. It causes drifting, which means roads that were just ploughed can be covered again in minutes. Strong winds can affect power lines and tree branches. It drives wind chill temperatures to dangerous levels where exposed skin can be affected by cold very quickly. This storm system is producing significant wind in multiple areas. Alaska is seeing it. Wyoming is seeing it. Parts of Colorado and the California mountains are seeing it. Maine's coastal areas are seeing it. Wind is the factor that elevates danger levels dramatically. Fifth, the duration of the warnings is notable. These aren't short-term advisories for a quick-moving system. Some of these warnings span multiple days. That's a long time to deal with severe conditions. It means more snow accumulation overall. It means longer periods without travel. It means extended stress on power grids and infrastructure. It means people need to plan for being stuck at home longer than just one day. Duration matters because even moderate conditions become problematic when they last long enough. Sixth, we have to talk about the combination of elevation and moisture. The Rockies and the Sierra Nevada are both tall mountain ranges, and when moisture-laden storm systems hit tall mountains, the result is dramatic snowfall. This system is hitting both ranges with significant moisture content. It's not a dry, fluffy snow event. It's a heavy, wet snow in some areas and a deep, overwhelming snow in others. The combination of moisture availability and orographic lift is producing snowfall rates that are impressive even for these mountains. Ski resorts love snow, but even they have limits. When snow falls too hard and too fast, it becomes a safety issue rather than a welcome addition. Seventh, there's the forecaster language. When the National Weather Service uses phrases like impossible travel, they're not being dramatic. They're being precise. Impossible travel means exactly that. It means you can't safely drive. It means getting stuck isn't just inconvenient, it's potentially life-threatening. It means emergency services can't reach you quickly if something goes wrong. When you see that language in a forecast, it's a signal that conditions are severe enough to warrant complete changes in plans. This storm has generated that language across multiple states. Eighth, the cold air mass driving this system is significant. We're not talking about temperatures just below freezing. In some areas, especially Alaska and Wyoming, temperatures are well below zero. That kind of cold creates additional problems. Vehicles may have difficulty starting in extreme cold, and water systems require protection from freezing. Outdoor exposure should be limited to brief periods in extreme cold. When you combine extreme cold with heavy snow and wind, you have a situation where vulnerabilities multiply. Power outages that would be manageable in milder weather become dangerous when the temperature inside a house can drop to freezing in hours. Ninth, there's the multi-state coordination aspect. When a storm affects 5 states simultaneously, it requires coordination among different weather service offices, different emergency management agencies, different state governments. Resources that might normally be shared between neighbouring states during an emergency are stretched thin because everyone is dealing with their own crisis at the same time. A state that might send snowplows or power crews to help a neighbour can't do that when they need all their equipment at home. This creates a situation where each affected area has to rely more heavily on its own resources. 10th, and perhaps most importantly, some details about this storm's exact path and intensity remain uncertain until they occur. Weather prediction has come a long way, but complex large-scale systems like this one still have variables that are hard to pin down. Exactly where the heavier snow bands set up. Exactly how strong the winds will get. Exactly when the system will finally weaken and move on. Those details matter enormously to people on the ground, and they're the details that remain somewhat uncertain until they actually happen. That uncertainty is part of what makes this storm concerning. What all these factors add up to is a winter storm that stands out even in regions accustomed to winter weather. It's not the worst storm these states have ever seen, but it's significant, it's complex, it's large, and it's still evolving. Which brings us to a crucial question. What does all this mean for the people actually living through it right now? Behind every weather warning, every forecast, every map showing storm tracks and snow totals, there are real people, families, communities. Individuals trying to go about their lives while dealing with conditions that make normal routines impossible. The statistics and meteorology matter, but so do the human stories. So let's talk about what this storm actually means for the millions of people in its path. Start with the most basic impact. Schools close. When a winter storm warning is issued, school districts have to make tough decisions. Close for the day and disrupt education. Stay open and risk students and staff being stranded or travelling in dangerous conditions. Most choose safety, they close. For parents, that creates an immediate problem: childcare. If both parents work and schools close, someone has to stay home. Plans get disrupted, work schedules change. It's not catastrophic, but it's a real inconvenience that ripples through communities. Businesses face similar decisions: stay open and hope employees can make it in, or close and lose a day of revenue. Small businesses especially feel this tension. Businesses that close must adjust their operations and inventory management. A retail store that closes loses sales during what might have been a busy period, but staying open when customers can't safely travel is pointless. So business owners watch the forecasts and make judgment calls. Most err on the side of caution. Close. Secure the building. Hope the storm passes quickly. Travel disruptions extend far beyond local roads. Airports in affected areas start cancelling flights. Denver International Airport, one of the busiest in the country, sees hundreds of cancellations when a storm moves through the region. That doesn't just affect people trying to fly out of Denver. It affects everyone with a connecting flight through Denver. A person trying to fly from Miami to Seattle might find themselves stranded in Denver because the next leg of their journey was cancelled. Those cascading effects mean a storm hitting Colorado impacts travelers across the country. Same with other major airports in affected regions. For people living in mountain communities or rural areas, the isolation becomes very real. Imagine living in a small town in Wyoming where the nearest grocery store is 30 miles away. When the storm hits and roads become impassable, you're working with whatever you have in your house. If you didn't stock up before the storm arrived, you're out of luck. There's no delivery service coming, there's no quick run to the store, you make do. Most people in these areas know this. They're prepared. But there are always some who get caught off guard, who didn't think the storm would be as bad as forecast, who may need to adjust their plans until travel conditions improve. Power outages are a serious concern during storms like this. Heavy snow weighs down power lines, ice coats lines and makes them brittle. Wind can affect utility poles and vegetation near power lines. When the power goes out in winter, especially in areas experiencing below zero temperatures, it's not just an inconvenience, it's dangerous. Houses get cold fast. If you don't have a backup heat source like a wood stove or generator, you're facing a potentially life-threatening situation. Families bundle up in blankets. They move into one room and try to keep it warm with body heat. They hope the power company can restore service quickly. Power crews work around the clock during these events. Linemen out in blizzard conditions trying to fix damaged infrastructure. It's dangerous work. They're working with high voltage in terrible visibility, with frozen fingers and wind that makes it hard to even stand upright. But they do it because they know people are counting on them. The public usually doesn't see this work, they just know their power came back on. But behind that restored power is a crew that worked through the night in conditions most people wouldn't even step outside in. Emergency services face enormous challenges during major winter storms. Emergency services face travel delays when road conditions are severe. Emergency vehicles may experience travel difficulties in heavy snow. Police officers can't patrol effectively. Response times that are normally minutes stretch into hours. That means people having medical emergencies are in greater danger. Rescue crews may face delays reaching people who need assistance. Emergency managers know this. They preposition resources as much as possible. They bring in extra personnel, but there are limits to what they can do when nature makes travel impossible. Think about the elderly population in these affected states. Older residents, particularly those living alone or with mobility challenges, benefit from community assistance with snow removal and wellness checks during severe weather. They might not have family nearby. They might not have reliable transportation. Community members often step in to help. Neighbours check on each other. Churches organise wellness calls, but the storm makes even those efforts harder. The person who would normally check on an elderly neighbour might not be able to get there themselves. Livestock and agriculture take a hit during these storms. We mentioned ranchers earlier, but it's worth expanding on. Cattle need water. When water sources freeze, ranchers have to break ice or haul water. That's hard work in good weather. In blizzard conditions, it's brutal. Calving season is starting in some areas, which means cows are giving birth in the middle of this storm. Newborn calves are extremely vulnerable to extreme cold and wind. Ranchers do everything they can to bring mothers and calves into sheltered areas, but there are always losses. Every storm like this costs ranchers money and results in livestock losses. It's a harsh reality of agriculture in these climates. The psychological impact of being stormbound shouldn't be dismissed either. Spending days inside, unable to go anywhere, watching the snow pile up and the wind blow, requires indoor activities and patience. Families adjust their routines and find ways to stay occupied during extended indoor periods. It's not the storm itself that causes this, it's the confinement, the loss of routine, the uncertainty about when things will return to normal. People living in winter climates develop coping strategies. They have projects to work on, books to read, movies to watch. But there's always an undercurrent of tension until the storm passes and life can resume. On the flip side, there's also something that brings communities together during events like this. People help each other. They share generators. They check on neighbours. They shovel driveways for people who can't do it themselves. There's a sense of shared experience, of weathering something difficult together. Small-town communities especially show this kind of resilience. Everyone knows everyone. They look out for each other. The storm becomes a story they'll tell for years. Remember that February storm? Remember how much snow we got? Remember when the power was out for 3 days? Those stories become part of the community's identity. But in the moment, while the storm is still raging, while people are still dealing with the immediate impacts, it doesn't feel like a story. It requires careful planning and patience. It feels like making it through one more day, one more night, until conditions improve. And that's where millions of people across 5 states are right now, living through it, adapting, or waiting. Which raises the natural question that everyone in these states is asking: when will this end? The question on everyone's mind across these 5 states is simple. When does it end? When do conditions improve enough that schools can reopen, businesses can resume, roads can be cleared, and life can get back to something resembling normal? The answer, like most things with weather, is it depends. It depends on exactly how the storm continues to develop. It depends on how quickly it moves. It depends on how effective cleanup efforts are once the snow stops falling. Forecasters are tracking this system closely, updating predictions as new data comes in. The current timeline suggests that the most intense conditions will persist through the middle of the week for most affected areas. Alaska, having been hit first, is likely to see improvements sooner. Wyoming and Colorado are in the thick of it right now. California's mountain areas are dealing with ongoing heavy snow. Maine is preparing for impact as the system moves east. By the weekend, most areas should be transitioning out of the warning phase and into the recovery phase. But that timeline isn't set in stone. If the storm slows down or intensifies more than expected, those dates could shift. Peak intensity is the term forecasters use to describe when conditions are at their worst. For this storm, peak intensity is hitting different states at different times because of how the system is moving. Alaska saw peak intensity days ago. The Rockies are seeing it now. Maine will see it in the coming days. Understanding this staggered timeline helps explain why warnings persist for so long, and why it feels like the storm is dragging on. It's not one brief event. It's a multi-day, multi-state progression. Once the snow stops falling and the wind dies down, the real work begins. Road crews have to clear thousands of miles of highway. City streets need ploughing. Driveways need shoveling. That work takes time, especially when the snow totals are measured in feet rather than inches. Priority goes to main roads and emergency routes first. Residential streets come later. Rural roads might not see a plough for days. Patience becomes essential. Everyone wants their road cleared immediately, but there's only so much equipment and so many operators. Power restoration follows a similar pattern. Crews work on the infrastructure that serves the most people first. Main transmission lines, substations. Then they move to smaller distribution lines and individual service areas. If you're on a rural power line that serves only a few homes, you might be waiting a while. It's not because the power company doesn't care, it's basic triage. Help the most people first, then work outward. Looking at the broader pattern, this storm is part of a winter that's been active across much of the country. We're seeing a pattern where Arctic air is diving south more frequently than in some recent winters. The jet stream configuration has been favourable for storm development. That doesn't necessarily mean this winter is historically severe, but it does mean it's been busier than average. For people living in affected areas, that translates to more snow, or more cold and more disruption than they might have experienced in the past few years. The good news, if there is any, is that we're moving deeper into February. Spring is coming. Days are getting longer. The sun is getting stronger. Even after a storm like this, the seasonal progression toward warmer weather continues. The snow that falls now will melt faster than snow that fell in December. The cold snaps won't last as long. There's light at the end of the winter tunnel, even if it doesn't feel that way when you're shoveling your driveway for the 10th time this season. For now, the message from weather services, emergency managers, and local officials is consistent across all 5 states. Take this seriously. Stay home if you can. Don't travel unless absolutely necessary. Check on neighbors. Have emergency supplies ready. Keep your phone charged. Follow official updates. These aren't new instructions. They're the same things people hear before every winter storm, but they bear repeating because complacency is dangerous. People think they can make a quick trip to the store. They think their vehicle can handle it. They think they've driven in snow before and this won't be any different. Then they end up stuck, stranded, or worse. If you have family or friends in any of these 5 states, now is a good time to check in. A simple text asking if they're okay, offering to help with anything they might need once the storm passes, staying connected. That human connection matters more than people sometimes realize. Knowing someone is thinking about you, caring about your safety, makes the isolation of a storm a little more bearable. The weather will move on. It always does. This storm system, as large and powerful as it is, will eventually weaken. It will move out into the Atlantic and dissipate. The warnings will be lifted, the snow will stop falling, communities will dig out, assess damage, and return to their routines. This particular storm will become a memory, a story, a reference point for future winters. Remember that storm back in February? The one that hit 5 states at once? Yeah, that was something. But while it's happening, while people are in the middle of it, it feels endless. That's the nature of being in a storm. You can't see past it. You can't imagine the sky being clear again. You're focused on getting through the next few hours the next day, one step at a time. That's how people survive these things. Not by thinking about the whole duration, but by breaking it down into manageable pieces. Get through today, get through tonight. Tomorrow will take care of itself. This storm is a reminder of something we sometimes forget in our modern, technology-driven world. Nature still has power over us. We can predict it better than we used to. We can prepare for it, but we can't stop it. When a weather system this large and this powerful develops, all we can do is get out of the way and wait for it to pass. That's humbling. It puts our daily concerns into perspective. It reminds us that we're part of something much larger than ourselves. If this video helped you understand what's happening across these 5 states, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel so you don't miss updates as this storm continues to develop and eventually moves on. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Are you in one of these 5 states dealing with the storm firsthand? Do you have family there you're worried about? Are you watching from somewhere warmer, grateful you're not in the path? I want to hear your perspective. Share your experience. Let's build a community of people who take weather seriously, who look out for each other, and who understand that knowledge and preparation save lives. Stay safe out there. This storm will pass. And when it does, we'll all have another reminder of how powerful nature can be and how resilient people are when they come together to face it.